Hey everybody, this is Melissa Chambliss with TWW Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio, and I am really excited today to be with Derek Bauman, who is running for City Council. So I appreciate everybody joining. This is a great opportunity. It's a Facebook Live event. So how this works is that you put in questions, you ask your questions, and Derek here is going to answer them after we do just a little short intro. So I thought I'd take a minute just to kind of go through Derek's kind of background and experience, and then I'm going to hand it over to Derek, and then we're going to hand it over to you to see what you guys want to talk about. So Derek is a lifelong public servant. After retiring after 26 years as a police officer, he was awarded a Medal of Valor and after suffering a career-ending injury during a felony arrest. He led fundraising efforts that led to over $207,000 being raised for the family of a slain Cincinnati police officer, Sonny Kim. Derek grew up in a working class family, his mom working third shift in a plastic factory, and while his dad worked in the United States Air Force and then retired to preach in your church. Derek graduated from the University of Akron and received 2 master's degrees in education and business administration. So he's a current homeowner in Over the Rhine and also has rehabbed and refurbished several homes around town within the Cincinnati area. In addition to that, he's also raised over $15,000 to save the West End Reds youth baseball. Definitely something that's needed for our youth in this community. He's also a current coach and a volunteer for the league, and Derek is tireless in his advocacy for inner city youth and people and young people. So Derek is currently the vice chair of All Aboard Ohio, a 501c3 advocacy organization supporting public transportation across Ohio. He's a lifetime member of the NAACP, chairing the local transportation committee, where he introduced a resolution in support of public transportation that was then adopted by the national NAACP. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Derek, let you kind of introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll dive into some questions. Looking forward to getting to know you better.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was, can you come with me? That's a great stump speech, probably better than I can do. That's amazing. First of all, thank you for this opportunity, and everyone out here watching on Facebook. It's really amazing these days with technology that we are not beholden and that we can create basically our own information channels. And thank you for you. I know this is a lot of work, what you've done in organizing the group. So thank you to you and to Tara and to all of the organizers who are just doing a great service by providing an outlet for this information. So thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Props.
It's all good. So, I mean, you hit on the keys. It sounded like a lot, and that's one of my challenges is to boil all of that down. There's a number of different angles that I've come from, but I think the key in my background for me personally is public service. That's what I've been dedicated to my entire life. I was, like you mentioned, I was a police officer, started out in northeastern Ohio. I grew up in the Cleveland area, actually one of the only white kids in my class growing up in my neighborhood and through school. Grew up in an eastern inner city suburb of Cleveland. And you mentioned the public transportation, and we'll talk more about it later, but it's certainly been one of the most important things to me because my family relied on that growing up. And we used public transportation every day. Couldn't afford 2 cars, only had one kind of a beater when it started, so we relied on that. So that's something that I have learned is very important to people, particularly in the urban areas, to be able to get around. A lot of folks don't have cars, and also to our continued growth, because a lot of young people today want to be on their phones and connected and watching this on Facebook Live rather than road raging behind the wheel. So that's something that's very important to me. But public service, volunteering in the community, working with our kids, especially as a police officer, and being able to connect with our youth is something that's very important, and to allow them to be able to see the person that's behind the uniform and to be able to connect as people and as human beings. And I think as we continue our conversation here today, that's an overarching theme in terms of equality, in terms of just being able to set our differences aside and connect on a human level, relate to each other and respect each other in that way. And I think if we can do that, that will go a long way in solving a lot of our problems, not only nationally and statewide, but certainly locally here in Cincinnati.
Great, thank you. That was fantastic. Sure. So nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
So here's how this is going to work, everybody. I have questions that we gathered from the website. Previously, you'll remember, I think Nicole put out a call to action where you could gather up questions. So I'm going to start going through those questions. But as you join and as you kind of start participating and have additional questions, please don't hesitate to put those in the comments. Those are going to be fed to me here. And we'll stop and we'll ask your questions first. We can always make the answers to the questions that were submitted previously available online at a different time.
Sure.
So, and also, just so everybody is aware, I know last time we did have an American Sign Language interpreter. This time we were not able to get a volunteer, but a transcript will be available afterwards, and I'll make sure that we post that in the comments also. Okay?
That's fantastic. And before you get started, I want to mention one other thing.
Yeah.
The great location that we're at right now. Yeah. So we're in Oakley, Ohio, Oakley neighborhood of Cincinnati, Ohio. Yeah, cheers. In an Irish pub that's actually in a rehabbed former church here in Oakley that some good friends of mine have invested in our community and rehabbed this wonderful historic building. And so historic preservation and maintaining our historic urban fabric here in Cincinnati is something that's very important to me as well. And so I think we both thought this would be a great setting and a great casual location to not only cheers with a beer, but also celebrate folks that have invested in our neighborhoods and in our communities and in our great historic fabric that we have here in Cincinnati. So thank you to Wendy and David Fries for hosting us
absolutely
here in their home this evening.
Gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous.
It is amazing. So let's get to it. Fire away. What have we got? What have we got?
We're going to start off with just asking you, what are your exact kind of responsibilities as a member of City Council if you're elected, and what are your responsibilities to its constituents?
Sure. So first of all, for folks that don't know, we may have some people watching that are outside of Cincinnati proper. We have 9 council members in the city of Cincinnati. And the election, which is coming up this November in 2017, is all 9. It's a field race, and all of the seats are at large. So one of the challenges that we have in Cincinnati is that in a race such as this, you're running to the entire city, not just a district or a ward. And so, frankly, it's an expensive race. We have a number of candidates and many good candidates that have thrown their hat in the ring. But that's kind of the outline of how it works. So we have 9 council members. Ultimately, you're responsible for the budget. I mean, that's the most important thing. And, you know, a budget outlines your priorities. And so we have the opportunity to, with our city manager form of government, to ultimately approve the budget. But we also have a secondary role that I think is sometimes lost and that we need to do a better job of, especially those of us that really care about the issues, about equality and other things like this, is to use that role to be a leader and show leadership. There are a number of things that we can speak to that aren't necessarily city issues per se, even if it's something of national interest, healthcare, these types of things, marriage equality, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about. Although not specifically a city issue, I think it's important for our leaders, for our elected leaders, to speak out and to be vocal leaders and actually be out front on these issues. So it's very important to not only look at the city issues, but how can we also be responsible and be leaders and talk about other issues and use the bully pulpit, if you will, in that way.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I think oftentimes you vote for that leadership, right? And you vote for that heart and that intent behind the decisions that you'll be making when you're making decisions on the budget. So you said budget is a big thing, and then obviously leadership is important to you. how can we hold you accountable? How can your constituents hold you accountable for kind of the things that you say you're going to do and what you execute on? What does that look like?
Well, I think it's important that, and first of all, let me back up and saying, I'm involved in politics now, but I'm a public servant. I'm not a politician. This has been my entire life dedicated to public service, and now that I'm quote unquote retired, I like to say that because it makes me sound old.
And feel better.
Yeah. So, I just think it's important that we don't forget. It's easy to offer platitudes, and it's easy for us to receive those as citizens, as voters, and to get caught up in just rhetoric, talking points, sound bites. We see that particularly nationally, right? It's easy to just fire off a couple of words and we get hung up on that. But at the end of the day, you have to be accountable. And what I tell folks is this. I grew up as a young person, in an urban neighborhood. I spent 25, 26 years as a police officer working the streets. I will continue to be on the streets. If you don't want to see me in your neighborhood, don't vote for me, because I am going to be out there. A lot of times we say we vote for them and they come around every 4 years, to community councils and such, and then what? We don't see some of our elected officials. Where are they? We can't find Steve Shabbat. We don't know where he's at. I haven't seen him in my neighborhood ever, I don't think. So I'm going to be out there, and I'm accessible, and so I want people to contact me. And after 4 years in office, if I haven't fulfilled that mission, then please don't vote for me. I mean, that's our responsibility as voters, is to have accountability of our elected officials at the ballot box.
Great, thank you. And so, what's the best way for your constituents to communicate with you? Either before the election now, right? How's the best way for people to get in touch with you then, and then afterwards too?
So all my I'm very active on social media.
I see you every day. It's great.
So, and that is, I'm real. And so I try to have that show actually what I do, and a couple of my campaign videos, it's actually me. It's not talking head stuff and a bunch of B-roll, shots of the city. It's actually me out on the streets. That's what I do out in the neighborhoods. I've done that on a volunteer basis before I ever decided to run for office. So at Derek Bauman, Derek at DerekBauman.com, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Derek Bauman, email, whatever it may be. I'll tell you what, 513-262-0345. That's my phone number. If you can manage to make it during daylight hours, that would be great. But that's how accessible I'm going to be. That's my actual phone number. And so I want people to contact me. I want that feedback. I don't have all the answers. I don't profess to. What I'm saying is I'm going to be respectful of people. Take our voters and our citizens, all of our citizens, thoughts, and put that together with my foundation and where I come from, and make good decisions for the city of Cincinnati.
Great. So how do you feel about Cincinnati's sanctuary city status?
I support it. I think one of the things we need to keep in mind, and first of all, I was there on the steps of City Hall for the rally, the immigrant rally at Sanctuary City. The thing that we need to keep in mind, a couple of things. One is, I come from a background as a police officer. People need to feel comfortable enough, especially when this comes to public safety, when it comes to fighting crime, quite frankly. People need to feel comfortable enough that they can call the police, and they don't have to worry about being profiled or anything else like that. So I think it's important for us to be a welcoming city, and for us to just create a space where people can feel safe, generally speaking. And with that, that's going to help all of our neighborhoods be safer, because if we're talking about investigating crimes, if we're talking about police-community relations, people feel comfortable, aren't scared just for the simple fact that a police officer is there. The other thing is, I think we get caught up in the rhetoric, especially nationally. It's really not changing anything. That was pretty much the practice in the city of Cincinnati anyway. It was more just a statement that this is how we're going to be. And as a practical matter, I don't think it's really changing anything. I think we are a very welcoming city to immigrants. I mean, we were all immigrants at one point in time, right? And so I think we need to be respectful of that. And certainly to anybody that was at the rally or watched any of the video of that and heard people speak, it was moving, you know, and we have folks that have come here. I mean, a doctor from UC talking about, being just heartened by people showing up to support our immigrant population. I think it's very important.
Great, thank you. So what's your plan for taking on racial healing in this community, and how does it differ from kind of what's been done in the past?
Well, and this is something that, for me in my career as a police officer, was very important, connecting with our youth and trying to bridge gaps. Again, not having people be afraid just because I was there in a uniform. And I think ultimately it comes down to communication. It comes down to a lack of fear to reach out to folks, have these types of communications, one-to-one, to be able to look someone in the eye, and not that I can walk in your shoes, but I can be empathetic of where you come from. So I think a lot of it's just a lot of our division, comes down to a lack of communication. We need to be comfortable with one another. We need to speak to one another and at least build this empathy and this human connection. How can we do that? And part of that's just being present, quite frankly. Part of that's going into neighborhoods and just being with folks that maybe don't look like you, are not where you come from. And so I think just establishing that connection, allowing people to feel welcome and to be approachable, we can continue to do that. I think we have too much divisiveness, and I think we need to work more together and think more about our commonalities and our differences.
Good, thanks. And then for those of you who maybe have just joined or just joined recently, I'm here with Derek, who's running for City Council. So feel free to jump in with any questions that you have, but we are kind of going through some of the questions and giving Derek an opportunity to kind of address some of those and answer those for us. But again, feel free to jump right in with your own questions, and we'll definitely take a pause from the prepared questions and answer those, okay?
Sure, yeah.
All right, great.
Please, everybody.
So how will you ensure that public schools are providing comparable and competitive education, regardless of race, economic status, where you live in the city?
Sure.
All of those types of challenges that I think we see in our education departments.
Sure. So first of all, we passed issue 44, the school levy with preschool promise, which I actively supported. A lot of good people worked on that. And I think that's going to be a great program to bring kids up to speed that didn't necessarily have the opportunity to go to preschool and so are behind already when they're starting kindergarten. We know that much of the brain and much of our future is determined on those early formative years, right? So this is I think this is great. Secondly, I'm not running for school board. I am running for city council. But I think what the city can do is partner with CPS. And when the schools have the kids between 8 and 3 or 8 and 3:30, whatever time it is, that we do what we can from the city's perspective to create after those hours a condition where kids are safe. If they're hungry, they can have food. And that we work on our rec centers, our after-school programs. Of course, I've been involved with the West End Reds for a number of years. I'm very proud of this. We have now 115 kids in our baseball program, and so it gives them a great activity all summer long that without this they wouldn't have, and the ability to learn leadership from our coaches who volunteer a lot of time. These are kids that don't necessarily have all the opportunities that even I had growing up, or that some of the kids in the suburbs have. We have to rent vans at times to get to away games and things like this. So I would say creating creating healthy conditions, creating safe neighborhoods. If you're having a shooting outside of your house at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, it's hard to focus on school the next day. If you're hungry, it's hard to focus on school the next day. So what can we do to, provide a good environment to the best that we can outside of those school hours?
Okay, thanks. That's definitely crucial. So we have a question from the live session. So,
great.
Yeah. As a former police officer,
Yes.
Can you speak to what you think about the militarization of the police and cases of black people being killed by police officers?
Well, actually, if folks go to my website, derekbauman.com, you can see on there one of the op-eds that I wrote a couple of years ago, basically calling out one of the shootings, probably the worst of just a bad, it was a murder, was what it was. The Walter Scott shooting in North Charleston, South Carolina. And so I kind of outlined in there where I'm coming from on this, and that is, I think from the police perspective, we need to be honest and just say if something happens that's completely outside of the bounds, we need to be honest about and call it what it is. And in that particular case, unfortunately, the officer was charged with a murder. He shot Walter Scott from about 50 feet away, unarmed, running away in the back, and ultimately it was a hung jury, 11-1, I think it is. But I think the key there is when something crazy like that happens, we need to speak out about it and say, you know what, there are 800,000 police officers in the United States, and particularly CPD does a great job. I think probably has some of the best community relations of any big city police department in the U.S. But if something like that happens, we need to be honest about it and say, you know what, this was wrong. Either this person made a mistake or it was just bad. And so let's be honest about that. And I think in the community, people respect that then and say, you know what, yeah, we appreciate you saying calling it for what it was. So that's the most important thing. But by the same token, we have to understand that our police officers do an extremely dangerous job every single day, all hours of the day, midnights, weekends, the holidays, 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, rain or shine, you name it. And we just saw this week a Cincinnati police officer, it's 2 weeks ago now, I guess, but was shot. We saw the video today. They actually released the body cam video, and we saw that the suspect didn't produce a weapon until he was this close. And fortunately, that weapon jammed, or we could have been going to another police funeral. One of the things that I did was when Sonny Kim was killed a couple of years ago, Cincinnati police officer here in District 2, where we're at right now. I started the fundraising, and we raised over $200,000 for his family. And so, it is very important that we focus on community policing, establish good relationships, particularly with our young people. But by the same token, we realize and we support our good police officers. They're out there doing a very difficult job every day.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. So let's move on to kind of health and safety and kind of accessibility, some of the questions that some of our members had regarding those aspects. So what is the city's responsibility related to public health, and what role would you propose city government play in the kind of like the population health management?
Sure. So we have a health department. We have a number of health clinics throughout the city, and these are important. In short, I support them, provide a vital service to our people, and especially when we look, at the national situation with healthcare. For me, as a matter of fact, when I left the police department, and which was just this past October, and now I'm kind of in between to where my pension kicks in, without health care when I left, and actually went on the exchange and found an affordable policy through the ACA. And so particularly in these times when we see the national battle going on, where we might have millions uninsured, this is a vital service. So I support our health clinics and would not support cutting them.
Okay, great. Thank you. So what will you do to combat the heroin epidemic?
So,
Drugs in general.
yeah, well, as far as heroin goes, I think this needs to be our focus. First of all, we're not going to arrest our way out of it. People ask me that, especially coming from a law enforcement background. How do you feel, or you might think that I just want to arrest people and that's it. Not the case. We are not going to arrest our way out of heroin. I think we should be focused when it comes to the law enforcement piece to that puzzle on suppliers, distribution, those types of things. But from an addiction standpoint, I think we have to focus on treatment. And it's greater than a city issue, to be honest. It's a regional issue. It's a statewide issue. As a matter of fact, our county commissioner, Denise Driehaus, was just up in Columbus, I believe, yesterday or the day before, asking for additional resources from the state level to combat heroin. So I think we need to focus at its base on the concept that we're not going to arrest our way out of it, that we have to treat addiction, and quite frankly, there just simply aren't enough resources right now. We are losing 8 people a day in the state of Ohio to heroin. And up until my last knee surgery that I had, I was working the road and for the city of Mason, and I've seen people dead from overdoses, and I've seen people revived from nearly their last breath with the use of Narcan. So I think that's important to have Narcan availability. At the end of the day, we're responsible for saving people's lives. And then after that, I think it takes a multifaceted approach with treatment to impact the root of it and get to that. But we are certainly here in Southwest Ohio and Northern Kentucky, the center for opioid addiction and now heroin. And so it's a horrible problem. If there were easy answers to it, it would be solved, and it's not. But it's going to take a multifaceted approach and not just simply arresting people.
Mm-hmm. So how do you propose the city government, what do you propose the city government does to decrease the spread of HIV and syphilis and other kind of transmitted diseases, either through blood or sex?
Sure. So that goes back to the health department, health clinic issue, and have this availability. I support Planned Parenthood. Again, greater than a city issue, but in generally providing health services to folks. And I think actually Councilmember Chris Seelbach is currently working on and proposing a needle exchange program because we have people dying and getting really sick from Hep C. And so that's, one of the things that's transmitted via dirty needles. I have in my police career, been called out and come across and find, and we see them in neighborhoods, in parks and other things where people are using this, dirty syringes that are used and people just dispose of. And so I think if we had a better program to an exchange, this at a minimum allows people to not transmit diseases in that way, and then also have this biohazard waste of the dirty needles that pets can come across, children can come across, and these types of things. So again, it's a health issue, and so I look forward to Councilmember Seelbach's program, and I think it'll be helpful in that regard.
It kind of goes along with the whole prevention, right? Prevention of, a disease or something like that is a lot cheaper than when you actually get hepatitis C or something like that.
Sure, and it impacts us, and there may be people impacted or exposed, that wouldn't otherwise be. So even if you say, well, this doesn't necessarily impact me, I'm not an addict, nobody in my family is, thank God. But it can still impact you in other ways from being exposed. So if we can keep people from being exposed, then we should do that.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about improving community relations with police officers and that type of thing. And so one of the questions that someone on the site has is really around your support and investment in diversity training for not just police officers, but really first responders in general, in how to deal with mental illness, how to deal with potential unconscious biases that we all have, just based on our own kind of background and where we came from.
Sure. So I can tell you that when I first started in law enforcement in the early 90s, a while ago, there was little, if any, of that type of training, diversity, mental health. Now, I can tell you that from a state level, the state is now requiring some of this. I think we can do more, and CPD does go above and beyond the state requirements when it comes to this type of training, particularly the mental health. That's something that is very important to me. We saw going back in time, in the 70s and the 80s, this kind of disinvestment. I think a lot of it was just trying to save money. Government's trying to save money in closing down mental health facilities and these types of things. And this has impacted our homeless population. We see with the Cincinnati Police Department, nearly 50% of officer-involved shootings involve folks with mental illness. So it's important for officers to have training in dealing with those folks. Certainly I've, over my career, dealt with a lot of folks that are having those issues. A lot of times they don't know where to turn. So the police department is their 911 is their last resort a lot of times, or we're somehow coming into contact with them. It impacts also our healthcare with emergency rooms and such. There just aren't a lot of places and programs enough for the folks. So that mental health aspect, that mental health training for police is very important because, unfortunately, there are folks that aren't able to get the help and the assistance that they need, and so we end up having to deal with them. So it's good to have that training, people with mental health background to to help us to understand.
Right. And so I think some of the next questions, I don't know from a city council perspective how much impact, but I think a lot of what's come out in these questions and the questions from our members is really just wanting to get to know you as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you stand for from a philosophical standpoint, because that's at the end of the day kind of what you want to vote for, and your policies follow your heart.
Sure.
Right, and what you say. So, what kind of do you support legislation or initiatives guaranteeing members of the LGBTQ community the ability to adopt? Do you support their right to get married? Do you support, I think there's a lot of fear right now that we're going to kind of go backwards a little bit.
Right.
And so who in our community, who are we voting for that supports this, to your point earlier, be that voice of leadership? Sure. Whether it's a city council issue, it's still a city issue.
So I am extremely proud. Just today, I received an endorsement from Jim Obergefell, who is the lead plaintiff in the Obergefell v. Hodges case that led to marriage equality. If folks would like to stop by my Facebook page, my personal page, or the campaign page, Derek Bauman, there's a copy of the letter up there, and I'm very excited and proud that Jim, who I consider a personal friend, supported me with an endorsement. So the answer to your question is yes. I've long been an ally of the LGBT community. The transgender youth rally that we had, led by, again, Councilmember Seelbach on the steps of City Hall a couple of weeks ago, I was there for that, supporting folks, got a lot of great feedback. Just in general, people saying, hey, thanks for coming out. Just, again, your presence, being there in support means a lot to people. But yes, I support marriage equality. I support, we have some great parents in the LGBTQ community. And again, going back to CPD, we actually have an LGBTQ liaison on the Cincinnati Police Department, which I think is amazing. We want Cincinnati at the end of the day to be a welcoming place, and I think we're we've done a good job in that. Probably in the 1990s, not so much. We were known for a number of cases and different things that went on as not being a welcoming city, but we've turned that around, and I think we need to continue to do that. To ultimately be a place where everybody feels welcome, and it's a way to, at the end of the day, attract talent, attract creative talent, attract businesses who want to have great folks working for them, and just be open-minded and have a wonderful city that everybody feels welcome in.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. The letter is fantastic, so I caught it quickly before on my way here. So,
and thank you, Jim, if you're tuning in. So that was a wonderful letter. Jim was my neighbor across the hall for about 5 or 6 years. He's now moved to Washington D.C. But in reading his book, I was like,
he was here in Cincinnati.
Yeah, he was here in Cincinnati, and so it was a wonderful story, heartwarming to see how it ended up, and to see two people that cared for each other so deeply, come together, and not only for Jim and John, but also for the thousands of people really across the country that Jim and his leadership and his courage really enabled to have the same freedoms to get married as the rest of us.
Yeah.
I think is a wonderful thing.
Good, absolutely. So we have another question from the site. So,
Great.
What would be your priorities for Cincinnati's budget? What changes would you advocate for as a city council member?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges that we've had is, and it really doesn't get discussed enough, but from the state level, the cuts to local government funding. This has impacted our local governments, our cities, our schools across the state, and it's a challenge that we have to overcome. These cuts have cost from our Republican state legislature and our governor nearly $30 million a year to the city of Cincinnati.
So they cut that money away from coming to the city of Cincinnati?
Correct. So ultimately, when the state income tax was passed in the early 1920s, 1930s, part of the deal was that part of that money would get sent back to localities. And so this has always been the case up until the last couple of years, when the Kasich administration has cut this funding that was coming back to counties, coming back to townships, coming back to cities. And so we've seen cities across the state raising their income tax. We haven't done that here in Cincinnati. We've been able to, partially through growth in attracting new businesses, attracting new citizens. And I think that's ultimately what we have to do. If we're not growing, we are dying. In 1951, we had 500,000 people in the city of Cincinnati. We bottomed out in 2012 around 295, and we've been creeping up. We're back around 300,000 now. But we have to create a city that's growing, a city that's vibrant, a city that isn't losing its young people. And our kids that graduate from UC and Xavier, creating the kind of city that makes them want to stay and not go to Chicago or Charlotte or Atlanta or Boston or DC or these other places. So that's what we need to do. I think we've done a fairly good job of that. I think we can do a lot better. And then I think the next step in that growth, and that growth then sustains our tax base, even in light of the cuts that are happening in Columbus, is focusing on our neighborhoods. And so that when our young people that want to go to happy hour and OTR, right, that then when they want to have, start a family, get a dog, have a baby, have a house with a yard, that they're not looking to necessarily Westchester and Mason or Fort Wright, but they're willing to stay here in our neighborhoods, like here in Oakley, Walnut Hills, Westwood, College Hill, Clifton, and Price Hill, and other neighborhoods like that. That's the next phase in our growth, and really that's what I want to focus on in making a safe city and a welcoming city and a vibrant city, so that we can grow our population and then grow our tax base.
So speaking of city and growth and that type of thing, how will you help alleviate poverty in Cincinnati by improving public transportation? I mean, what are some of the initiatives that you think can help revitalize our city, but revitalize it for everyone, regardless of socioeconomic status?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned public transportation. That is something that's near and dear to my heart. I think we mentioned early on. When I grew up, my family relied on public transportation. We know that here in our region, we have 75,000 jobs that are unreachable by public transportation. We see across the country regional cooperation, countywide cooperation. Here, Metro is funded purely by 0.3 on Cincinnati's earnings tax, 0.3 percentage points. And it's simply not enough. It's not a sustainable model. Metro has really done a great job with limited resources, again, with almost no state funding. We rank 43rd per capita in the state level in terms of public transportation funding. So I think that's a key. We need to support and have a robust public transportation system. Beyond that, when I talk about a growing and vibrant city, we have to do that and make sure that we do not have large pockets of poverty and people that are left behind. So we need to focus on, and one specific way is that the city provides abatements. The city provides tax base or tax breaks for developers, and we need to get something back for that. Right now, a lot of times it's just a rubber stamp, and particularly depending on who you are, if you're a favored developer and those types of things, and that gets into the kind of in the weeds of the politics. But we need to make sure our communities are diverse in income, in makeup in terms of race and these types of things, and that we are not leaving people behind as we grow.
Right. So another question that we had, and we have just a few more questions, and then we'll make sure we don't get any more from the site.
Sure.
So another question we had was the current condition of the Cincinnati water treatment plants. What is the current situation with those? Are they overloaded? And what does the city need to do in regards to that to make sure we don't have a problem with our drinking water? Sure.
So just to be clear, we have Cincinnati Waterworks, which is responsible for drinking water, and then we have MSD, which is the sewers, storm sewers, and sanitary sewers. I think MSD right now, and we're talking about sewers, not the most sexy topic, right? But very important.
Is. Yeah, but it's pretty important when they go bad.
Well, and it gets to yes. And we're seeing that impact right now where we have what's called combined sewer overflow, which is at times when if you have storms, the runoff and the rainwater, and this gets into a bigger issue of land use planning, when we have large parking lots that create all this runoff. It's not just about development, it's also about the impacts of that development. And so I'm a proponent of good, proper urban planning to minimize these things. But what we get with that overflow is actually stormwater then mixing with the sanitary sewers, and that going directly into the Mill Creek, into the Ohio River. It's a huge problem from just in terms of our environment and such. And so we're actually under a decree right now from the EPA to get that fixed. One of the challenges that we have is this is a partnership with the county. And I think we've had a situation in the city in years past in the county that there just wasn't that spirit of cooperation. And so there were issues and problems that weren't able to be resolved simply because folks couldn't be in the same room together. I mean, it's crazy. I think with the current makeup of our county commission, with the addition of Denise Treehouse and Todd Portune, I believe is going to help that. And so we cannot let the politics get involved to where we have this situation. We're coming up with to a contract renewal with the county in 2018. And so we are going to have to work together with the county and regionally to solve this problem. So that's the first step in that solution. It's a very complex problem, but the first step is to at least be able to be in the same room and have good conversations to have a dialogue and to work towards a solution. So that's something that I'm focused on is, setting some of the politics, the divisiveness aside, and how can we work together to move forward for really for the city, for the region, and for all of our people.
All right. Thank you. So this is Melissa again. So I'm here with Derek, who's running for City Council. We're going to give you just 1 second. I'm going to ask one final question, but anyone that has any other questions that you'd like to submit, feel free, and then we'll turn it over for you for a wrap. Okay?
Yeah. No, this is great. I could go on all night. This is wonderful.
Good. So how will you work within the council and within the local government, right? Because you talked about, even the conflict over the sewers and people not being able, how are you going to approach working with the city council, working with the local government to really kind of make progress in the city and move the city forward?
Well, so it's a great question, and I'll give you an example of it. So one of the things I do in my role as vice chair of All Aboard Ohio, we are working on public transportation across the state. Everything from, we had led the effort to save the bus benches in Cincinnati. It's a whole other long-winded topic, but basically the city was taking out all the bus benches, and grandma in Madisonville, when I say grandma, actually I had somebody reach out to me and said, yes, my grandma in Madisonville thanks you for leading the charge on save, because her bus bench is still there, and they were going to take it away.
Yeah.
And she's in her 80s, and she has to wait forever for the bus because we don't have enough public transportation, so at least she has a place to sit.
And it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's
a big deal.
Something,
if you have ability issues or something like that, I mean, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal, and it's a problem that often gets overlooked. But in that role, one of the things we're working on is increasing our Amtrak service, which a lot of folks don't even know that we have Amtrak service in Cincinnati.
I don't think I do.
Yeah, well, that is a problem. That is a case in point of why we're working on this. So my goal is to bring back daily rail service to Chicago in Cincinnati for the first time in 35 years.
Oh, wow.
Again, if folks we had some great news on that. The West Virginia House just voted today 95-5 to support this. So we're working on that. Our Amtrak Cardinal line that comes through 3 times a week in the middle of the night, it also goes through West Virginia. So my point is, I've been working across party lines, across state lines, to improve our Amtrak service here in Cincinnati. It's a wonderful way to travel that we need to improve. It's, again, getting to the bigger issue of infrastructure investment, which across this country we do not have enough of. But that is one example where I've actually been working with Councilmember Amy Murray, a Republican who's the current chair of our council's transportation committee, to work on these issues. So I think we need to come together. We need to, there's time to fight. There is a time to fight, and I'm not afraid to do that. That's how I got hurt, as a matter of fact, kicking in the door for to save a guy that was getting stabbed on the other side. That's how I got injured. That ended my police career. So I am not afraid to kick in doors for the people of Cincinnati. I'm not afraid to fight, but there are also times when we need to set aside some of our differences and look more towards commonalities that we have to move our city and to move our region forward.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Derek. It was really great. So I'm going to turn it over to you right now. So I think my work here is done. And I'll let you just kind of wrap with anything you want to leave us with, and anything else that you feel like maybe we didn't have a chance to cover, but you feel like it's important for us to know about you.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's so much. There's so many issues that are going on right now nationally, that are going on locally. I hope that I get the opportunity to interact. Please get a hold of me on Twitter at Derek Bauman. Shoot me an email, derek@derekbauman.com. I want to connect. I want to hear what your thoughts are. But one of the things I think we need to focus on when we look at a Facebook group like this that has nearly 8,000 people, I mean, you have, and this is one of the things I love about Cincinnati, you have the ability here to really make an impact and move the needle. I've been involved in a lot of community stuff. I'm now running for council. I didn't come for money. I didn't come from a name in Cincinnati, but I chose to get involved. I chose to get active and make a difference. And in this city, we can actually do that. In New York or Chicago, it would be much, much more difficult, right? But here in Cincinnati, individuals such as yourself chose to get involved, and now you're making an impact. You're reaching out to 8,000 people. I mean, that's amazing. But what we need to do ultimately is to translate this activism, certainly on social media, online. We had 12,000 people at the Women's March. It's amazing. If we can get 8,000 of you on Facebook, if we can get the 12,000 people at the Women's March, to translate that great activism and energy into supporting our progressive, with a capital P, progressive candidates, we can do that. In 2013, The difference of the 9th position being on council and the 10th position being not on council was 850 votes.
That's nothing.
It's nothing. Literally every vote counts. But I would ask everyone that watches this to please get involved. And, it doesn't have to be me. It could be another great candidate that we have. But I would certainly ask you to please support me, get to learn more about me. But ultimately, this is an expensive race, and we need your time, volunteer. We need your talents. If you have any, be a photographer, come out to events, and ultimately we need your treasure. I mean, it's just the reality of politics, the way it is today. This is it's a six-figure plus race because we're essentially running a marketing campaign. You can have the greatest message, but if you can't get that message out, then people aren't going to hear it and be able to resonate with that message. So I would ask you, please, to make a donation at derekbauman.com. If everybody in this group gave $25, pretty much fund a campaign, and you can get your candidates, especially in your local races. And I hate to say it, but we need to take a page out of the Tea Party playbook. This is what they did in 2010. They focused on local races, school boards, township trustees, county commissioners, and your city council members. We can do that. We can do that with your help. Get involved. You can make a difference in Cincinnati, and that's a fantastic opportunity that each and every one of us really has the opportunity to make that difference here. Certainly can in this race, and I would welcome your support.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks, everybody. That's a wrap, and we'll have the transcript available for anybody who's just joining. You just missed it, but you can always rewind and take a look. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.